Recovery is something we skip all the time, but as I get older, it literally is absolutely vital to all my fitness stuff at the moment. I've got a massive ultra coming up in July, and I'm so excited to share with you that I'm partnering with Wintergeen and all their products to get me over that finish line. I used it between my London Marathon and Ultra X, and I would not have made that ultra start line without these products. The Epsom salts, the magnesium lotions, the anti-cramp spray, I used it all, and honestly, my legs have never felt stronger. Highly, highly recommend these products. I have a discount code for you as well. DSM26 gets you 25% off. And honestly, this stuff is so well priced already. So go check it out in the links below. That's it from me. Enjoy the next episode. Ew. Manu, welcome to the Dice Monday podcast.
Thanks very much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. Where have you come from this morning?
Barnet.
Right.
Yeah, that's home for the family, and travelled down to Barnet yesterday from Norfolk, where I'm just finishing up a year of training before moving to London in August.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Are you excited to come back down?
I am. Yeah, it's where I'm going to be doing my specialty training
Right.
in child and adolescent psychiatry.
Okay.
And I'm super excited to be at the South London and Maudsley Hospital,
Amazing.
which
Yeah.
is, I wouldn't rather be training anywhere else. It's where a lot of the leaders in the specialty are, and I'm really looking forward to just focusing on that, because a lot of your career as a doctor initially is rotating between every specialty to get that foundation training.
Right.
Now I'm excited to just lock in and honored to be at the place kind of best for that as well.
Right. So share with the audience a little bit about sort of a brief background on how you got to where you are today and what sort of qualifications you did to get there.
Yeah, I guess maybe a neat way of doing that is sharing some of the decisions I've had to make and why I made them.
Right.
So one of the first big ones was choosing to become a doctor, right? So towards the end of school, I wanted to do something that I think was going to improve the quality of life for people, particularly those in need. And that naturally leads you to medicine. I think everyone who becomes a doctor would resonate with that principle. Of course, it was something that would make my family proud and was sort of quite aspirational to try and do. So it felt like something that would pull out a lot of my best effort and my best work. So I kind of liked that element of striving to become a doctor. And then when I got to medical school, I learned about all the different parts of the body and, thinking about how I can be best kind of positioned to improve quality of life for people. It then sort of aligned a lot with my personal journey growing up, becoming an adult at university, where I realized that actually the quality of our life is mainly determined by the quality of our mind, right?
Interesting.
Like, you could be a prince in the Middle East somewhere and have all the riches in the world, but feel depressed. Or you could live in a slum somewhere in the world, maybe even be disabled, maybe not even have much to live on each day. And you could find the joy in every little moment and be the happiest person in the world. And for me, that was a shift, because it was like, so it's not your circumstances that determine your quality of life, it's your quality of mind.
Right.
And every single person in the world, anyone who has a mind, can benefit from that sort of cultivation of their own mind. And it was really fascinating just in terms of a learning and curiosity perspective. I could spend my whole life trying to just study this topic. It's not very...
It's endless.
It's endless, and it's also, we're not very clear on it right now. We're very clear, more clear in other specialties of medicine, like how the heart works and certain drugs there, but you can't really say how the mind works. And there are scans to show which parts of the brain light up when you're doing certain things and certain emotions, but you can't quite, note down exactly where that particular memory is stored, how it's reactivated, the feelings associated with it. So the fact that there's so much left to explore is super exciting, and it's widely applicable to everyone. So that's what drew me to mental health. I'm not trying to understate how some people can have a much harder mountain to climb, but every single person with their own mind can benefit from really cultivating a higher quality of mind, because that's what shapes your sort of experience and your feelings and thoughts
Yeah.
through life.
And you mentioned something to me earlier that, you can have a billionaire living in a beautiful house and he can be depressed, and you can have someone living in circumstances where he's struggling, but he finds the joys in life and is a happy person.
Yeah.
That's
It's fascinating because what's the difference between those two people?
yeah,
They have the most opposite circumstances, but the difference, the pivotal factor is the quality of their mind.
right.
And for me, that's fascinating because it's so empowering, right? No matter your circumstances, you can always work on your quality of mind. And also, no matter your circumstances, you need to work on your quality of mind because your circumstances aren't going to lead you off sailing into the sunset just on their own.
Is it the experiences that they had growing up that might have cultivated that mindset?
I mean, it's a great question. Like, what shapes
Yeah.
that quality of mind? There's many things. Usually in psychiatry, we break it down into the biopsychosocial. So the biological, psychological, social. The biological will be how your brain has been encoded, genetics that are passed on. That definitely has a role to play. The psychological are the sort of thought patterns, and that can be, they're all linked as well. A lot of that can come from the biological predetermined factors,
Right.
but that's largely shaped by your experiences. And as you said, early life experiences growing up are the most pivotal.
Yeah.
And then the social kind of circumstances that you're born into, the determinants and the standard of living, it does shape what you value and what you are motivated by. So if we just focus on what are the actually modifiable factors, then yeah, it's their environment growing up and working on those to just try and create the best possible conditions for people to, thrive.
Yeah. I'll give you a real life example that I keep thinking of when we talk about people and circumstances. So I used to live in Mauritius. I lived there for 5 years. And the people that live there in what some people would call poverty, they live such incredibly happy lives because it's all they know. And they live on this beautiful island. They live in the sun every day. Everyone surfs. Everyone's happy. I did not meet an unhappy person, a local in Mauritius. They call it Creole locals. And that to me is the first thing I thought of when you said, people in certain circumstances that can live through good experiences and come out with a positive mindset.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, they also have many aspects of their life, I'm sure, which are conducive for a healthy mind, like a sense of community, nature, maybe valuing things that are less materialistic and more based on just valuing people unconditionally, maybe loving each other unconditionally rather than it based on any sort of status or material wealth.
Yeah. Do you think that sort of status and material wealth angle of people today has gotten worse and worse through things like social media and external validation, etc.?
Yeah, I think social media, it's people post what they want to post, and some people can be nice and vulnerable on there. But it tends to be highlights. And then when you go on social media and you see everyone's highlights, particularly around like success, maybe they've traveled to great places or been able to eat at nice places, and you don't get the full context of the struggle behind that, then you compare it to your own life, which you do have the full picture for, the highs and the lows, then it feels a little bit, more depressing for want of a better word, because you're then comparing someone's highlights with your full picture, and it's harder to overcome, right? So I do think social media does kind of create this unhealthy comparison, particularly in these superficial aspects that you can share over a camera, which naturally leads to the poor self-concept.
Can you tell me what's happening in the brain with something like anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads more to be understood about it from the field in general, and certainly from me as well, throughout my career. I think one of the first things that comes to mind about anxiety is to do with threat perception and perceiving, even let's say generalized anxiety disorder. If you were to walk down the street, there are many threats that are possible. Technically, someone could come up and hurt you, or something could go wrong and you could get harmed by it, or even if you're in a new country, if you're trying a new type of food, if you are more focused on the threat of it,
Hmm.
then it's going to give you some anxiety. And often that kind of appreciation for the threats in our life are very valid. We need this mechanism to keep us safe.
Mm.
But generalized anxiety disorder is probably a little bit overkill. And I think one of the saddest aspects of that is that it doesn't leave much space for you to just be present and enjoy that walk down the street.
Yeah.
Right? Enjoy that food in another country, because so much of that space in your mind is taken up by worrying about the perceived threats.
Yeah. Yeah. I had that. So I had chronic anxiety for 3 months, and the thoughts just never left my head. And the fear was actually having anxiety. So I just kept thinking, you have an anxiety disorder. That's it, wrapped around my head 24 hours a day for 3 months. I had what they call a tension headache. So the pressure was on top of my head, and I just couldn't release it because I didn't understand it. And I was fearful of becoming anxious and depressed and spiraling out of control just because I'd never experienced it before, or I had experienced it but didn't know what it was. And I think when I saw a psychologist, he told me, you are anxious and you've been anxious in the past. You just haven't known what true anxiety really is. And that feeling, I always call it like I was a broken toy, because it could come at any time. And it's like the back of my neck would vibrate, when I wake up. And I just couldn't believe what was happening in my brain, and how my brain was formulating this voice and this vision that was out of my control. So what is actually happening in the brain there? Do you know, like, the nervous system? And
Well, I mean, firstly, on a psychological level, it sounds like what you're describing is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a
Right.
way, right? Like worrying about having anxiety gives you anxiety.
Yeah.
It's very hard to step off of that train. And seeking the help that you did, I think it's something that we should all be encouraged to do in those moments, because that's when you need outside help, right? To help you understand, okay, this mechanism exists in your brain, and it has a state where it's functioning, it's healthy,
Mhm.
and it has a state where it might be disordered, just like any other part of the body, right? How can we help kind of reel it back in a little bit to go from that disorderly state into the more orderly state?
Mm.
But in terms of the specific neuroscience
Yeah.
behind it, there are aspects of the brain that are sort of related to things like paranoia
Mhm.
and threat perception. The anterior cingulate cortex, for example, it's been shown in MRI scans to have higher activity when people are in those states, and it actually gets activated even more with things like cannabis. So
Interesting.
yeah, some people who have long use of cannabis um, feel more paranoid because this part of their brain is on overdrive,
Right.
right? And those are the kinds of ways research can indicate to us, okay, maybe that part of the brain is an area we need to pay closer attention to when it comes to something like anxiety.
Are you finding this in younger children as well? Because you mentioned that you're going to be focusing on younger children, the work
Mm.
that you do. Is that a worry?
Yeah, I think every generation has its own battles and unique circumstances to try and overcome. For example, in some of the recent generations, it's been social media and
Mhm.
constantly being on the phone, that unhealthy comparison that we spoke about being ever present in their life, especially when they're trying to form their identities and actually stand out. It's important for them, for, healthy part of child development is to figure out who you are as an individual. And when you're on social media in this sea of comparison, it can lead to unhealthy ways where people try and stand out.
Mhm.
I think as well, unique circumstances faced by this generation, other than just digital and social media, is also as they get a bit older, the whole AI stuff and everything being more and more competitive. It's a lot of pressure on how people can figure out what they want to do with their life, and then um, can end up feeling quite lost.
Yeah, yeah.
Really.
Because I read a stat, and I want to get it for you
Mm,
quickly. The ages 10 to 14 are suffering from anxiety a lot more than historically.
Mm.
So the global anxiety disorders increased by 52% from 1990 to 2021, particularly in the group 10 to 14.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's happening?
There's many factors, right? I mean, first of all, just on the sort of research methods aspect, more 10 to 14-year-olds have literacy about these terms and
Right.
are more comfortable naming what their experience is as anxiety. And it may even, maybe some of the stigma has gone from being like taboo having a mental health condition, and the pendulum might have swung a little bit too far, where sometimes now there's research showing that children want to have a disorder that they can wear,
Interesting.
right? Because
Interesting.
I
It's
mean,
almost popular. Well, not
it,
popular, but a lot of the people that are successful and are online, they talk about that it comes from their traumatic childhood.
mm,
So that what you're saying is the younger generation are watching this and almost trying to force a traumatic or mental struggle that they need to overcome to be successful.
it's complex, right? Because on one hand, I don't think anyone really wants to actually feel anxious, but then on the other hand, there are elements of that that gives them an explanation for maybe sometimes not feeling like they're fulfilling their potential in certain ways. It's a difficult topic to discuss, but yeah, the research does show that some kids they see it as desirable to
Yeah.
have this these sort of labels. It might give them a unique type of attention. Again,
Hmm.
we spoke about the need to stand out. That could serve that purpose a little bit. But those are the research methods aspects. You know,
Right.
the way that people might, it might just be better, more picked up on.
Right.
But the reasons why, you know, forgetting about all of that, there might genuinely be more anxiety in 10 to 14-year-olds. You know, we've spoken about a few of them, particularly, I think, the way that life is lived through the phone a lot more. And therefore, you kind of dissociate a little bit between who you are as a person in the real world and then who you are online.
Yeah.
Right. And your online life can become more important. And the way people communicate now, children, is text first.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
there's been studies showing that children in particular prefer chatbots because they can just text and they're used to that and they're comfortable with that. They don't prefer real time conversation either over the phone or in person because the text that's asynchronous messaging gives a little bit of distance. And while it's all good and well,
It's almost safer.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It makes them feel that way sometimes. And while it is all good and well adapting solutions to meet those preferences, it's also important that we don't sort of promote purely chat based. We want to
Yeah. Yeah.
help people.
Well, my question is, what does the everyday parent do, to sort of help their children or try and avoid that sort of mental anguish or too much phone time or, what do we do?
Yeah, I think it's every parent's responsibility to be mindful of this stuff. It's also the responsibility of the government, frankly, to be putting in these laws where you have to have very clear age verification on certain apps and the way that phones are either encouraged or discouraged in school, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So it's not just something that can be solved within the household. There's more of a systemic problem that the government needs to take responsibility for. But within one's household, there are certain things like not giving screens as an easy solution. I know parenting is one of the most difficult things, and I hope to become a parent one day. But and so I do understand that sometimes you're looking for an easy solution to occupy the kids'
Yeah.
minds.
Yeah. You just throw the iPad.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that it's important to understand that doing that lots of times can have this cumulative effect.
Yeah.
And maybe doing the harder thing, like encouraging them to play outside, playing with them outside. I
So
know
the
it's,
simple things,
yeah,
really.
it's also with the rising cost of living, it's harder to get kids in group classes after school and stuff like that. because those aren't free,
Yeah.
but that would be really good.
And it's expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I just want to take it back a bit because you mentioned something to me earlier that 1 in 20 people actually benefit from mental health help.
Yeah, this was one of the most mind-blowing statistics, and that's why I put it up, because instead of just stating my mission, for example, it's very simple for me. I want to improve those statistics, right? So for every 20 people who need effective mental health care, only one ever truly benefits.
Yeah.
And that's because, I can't remember the exact numbers, but only a certain number actually access help. And of those, only a certain number receive
Help.
help.
Yeah.
And of those who receive help,
1 benefits.
like those who actually receive minimally acceptable treatment, which
Right.
is treatment that is actually going to meet their needs. Again, that's a fewer number. And then of those, only one ever fully benefits, because even that minimally acceptable treatment doesn't work for everyone
Yeah.
in their certain circumstances. So at every stage there, you can see there's opportunities to improve the statistics. And when you compare 1 in 20 to, say, those who benefit from cardiology problems, it's vastly different. And that's
Right.
what they call the treatment gap,
Okay.
the gap between need and treatment that works. And the treatment gap in mental health is larger than any specialty by a long way.
Wow. So the work you're going to be doing, it's quite funny you say digital assets that are going to be helping.
Yeah, so the research lab is specifically the CAMS digital lab, specifically focusing on technology-driven digital solutions.
So that's quite funny because we talk about technology being one of the biggest issues. So what are you going to be delivering to that child that needs mental help?
Yeah, it's interesting because you could logically make the leap that if technology is a problem, we should be staying away from it. But really what we should be thinking is children like using technology, and it's an inevitable part of living, and that's only going to become increasingly so.
Yeah.
So we need to embrace that and try and design technology and the way we use technology so that it's more conducive for healthy minds. Because if research labs like this don't exist to do that good work, it's going to be left in the hands of big data companies who aren't exactly doing the good work. They're causing the problems, right? So it's like if there's a big villain, you actually need to rise to that and operate in the same arena as the good guy.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think just so many people need it, and they just need the help, but it's more making them realize that they need the help. You have to try and make them believe that they need the help and try and get them to want the help. That's the hardest part, because what I found when I had it is when I accepted that I needed help, I now have a problem. And I was trying to understand that I have a mental problem, and accepting that was so hard. And only once that I accept that was I able to learn about it, get told that it's okay, then I could work through it. And I mean, honestly, I haven't struggled with the chronic side of anxiety since, so we're 2 years later. And it's no coincidence that I do a lot of exercise and I eat well. I mean, how important are those basics as well in terms of exercise and eating? How close is the gut to the brain?
All very interesting points. I just want to address your point there about self-awareness, though, because that shift from resisting that you have a problem to relaxing into it and then seeking help, it's like you can already,
that was the cure.
Yeah, you can already see how that simple shift alone reduces the tension massively. It's not the end, and in fact, with the mind, there is no end. You have to continually cultivate in the same way you would a garden, right? And I think that's why I'm a big fan of psychoeducation, and particularly one of the reasons I'm drawn to helping children and young people as well, because children and young people are the part of the population that is in school. It's already very clear that they require education. And if we can make psychoeducation, education about how the mind works, our needs, part of schooling, let's say.
I was going to say, we don't learn about the mind.
I mean, if it is the single most important thing to cultivate in terms of determining your quality of life,
Yeah.
what else is there that's more worth tending to then? your mind, right?
Yeah.
And we don't. I think part of that is because we don't have many answers.
It's not black and white.
Yeah.
So you can't do a test on it and give an answer because there's no right answer.
But it's very interpretive,
Right.
from those who have experience in the field, and that's why it makes for great reading and personal study. But it's not crystal clear, as you said. It's very subjective, and so I think that psychoeducation, helping people, not just young people, but people in general, have greater awareness of how their mind works. I think it could make that self-awareness much more within reach, so that they can then relax into seeking the help they need.
Yeah.
Right.
And talking about awareness of people's mindsets, a lot of people work off professional sportsmen. And I know that you're a fan of sports and mindset. Let's dive into that a little bit, because something happened yesterday that I want to ask you about.
Really?
Because you've spoke about Rory McIlroy.
Yes.
And his win at the Masters and the mindset behind that. But yesterday, this 19-year-old Francesco from Brazil beat Djokovic in a 5-set thriller at Roland Garros. It was one of the craziest tennis games ever. But the mindset to take Djokovic for 5 hours, first game he had ever played against him, as a 19-year-old. I mean, what's going on there? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, talk about endurance and sheer self-belief there. I would love to learn more about that kid, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of him in the years to come. It's fascinating, isn't it? Like, I think tennis in particular is a really interesting sport because there's nowhere to hide. It's just you. It's not a team sport. Obviously, there's doubles, but when we're thinking about the singles, and it's quite intimate, and aggressive with the person on the other side of the net. You could say golf is a single sport as well, but it's you against the whole. But in tennis, it's very combative in a way, and requires a lot of both the physical endurance capabilities, the technical skill, and the mental. So it's a fantastic sport in that sense. I think we've seen with some of the greats, like Nadal, for example, he comes to mind with that determination and willpower, how key the mental part of the game is. And Djokovic, I think, is the greatest example. I know he was on the losing end of this example here, but he's actually the best example of the mental fortitude required in sport. One story that comes to mind in particular, I think after he won one of the greatest tennis matches of all time, the 5-set thriller for the Australian Open final against Nadal.
Is that when they were both bending over the presentation? Yeah.
He said that, he lives a life of such discipline, but after that final, he was in the dressing room and all he wanted so badly was a bit of chocolate, because he just doesn't let himself have that kind of stuff. And he had one small piece of chocolate, put it on his tongue and let it melt in his mouth. And that was his reward for one of the most intense tennis matches of all time.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Right? And I think that for me is one of the greatest examples as well of what it means to be disciplined in sport and in life. For me, and I'm working on an article about this, it's something that I'm so interested in from a personal perspective as well as a professional perspective, is discipline is actually, it's basically impulse control, right? It's how can you resist the temptations, and arguably you could measure your discipline by how many impulses you resist per day. And if you're asked to do something that you don't want to do and you do it, that requires discipline. If you're asked to do something and you actually don't mind doing it, it requires less discipline, right? So that the more you don't want to do something and you end up doing it, the more discipline required. You think of the cold showers, the cold plunges, getting up early, dragging yourself out of bed.
When does discipline become negative? How far does it go?
I think the way it could be negative is if it's driven by needs inside of you that might be a little bit unhealthy. Right? Like, a lot of the greats, they're so driven because they've had difficult backgrounds. Again, Djokovic, a great example of growing up in quite tough times with quite heavy-handed father. And I think he's tried to figure this out himself a lot as well. Your discipline needs to come from the right place. If it's coming from a place to prove yourself because you are seeking that validation externally,
Mm-hmm.
then even when you have achieved what it is that you want to achieve, you won't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
You can feel empty, right?
Yeah.
And then that then makes you fall off the edge of a cliff. And down there in the pit is really where things can go wrong on the other side of
Yeah.
poorly driven discipline.
Because I think what people don't understand is obsession. So the difference between discipline, motivation, and obsession. Because motivation comes and goes. Discipline doesn't come and go, but it's sort of like a constant up and down. Obsession is a state where you do the thing without needing motivation. And it can be consistent, and it just can be at your will. But if it fades, it's gone forever. So I think a lot of people don't understand what it feels like, that obsession, and how different is obsession to anxiety. You know, because obsession is the same thing. That thought stays with you when you're in the shower, when you're working out, when you're talking to your partner. I know because I'm obsessed with something currently, and that can be negative and positive. And I listened to Chris Williamson the other day, and he said, hone in on that good obsession. Don't sacrifice it. Don't bring it down to the, sacrifice of something else. Do it until it becomes routine. And it was just so fascinating to hear him talk about the different elements.
I mean, that's why it's so important, again, to be self-aware, because you need to be aware of what might be coming from your shadow, what might be coming from the good parts of you, right? And with that awareness, then you can channel that obsession in the healthiest possible way, achieve success in the fields that you want to pursue, mastery even. And I really like the distinction there that you made between motivation, obsession, discipline. Motivation is kind of like inspiration. It will go and fade, and you need to strike while the iron is hot, because the iron will cool down. With discipline, it's completely independent of emotion. You do it regardless of how you feel, whether you want to do it or not. And then, obsession, I think what comes to mind there for me is there's also passion and love and vocation, purpose that comes from the obsession. And it's similar to what you asked me about, when can discipline be maladaptive. We just need to make sure that these things are coming from the right place, and the way that we can do that is self-work,
Right.
self-awareness.
So what type of self-work would you be talking about? Like, what does that look like?
There's various things, right? So personal study with self-reflection and reading the sort of books, having those conversations that explore your own psyche. Also seeking the help of a professional when we need it.
So how many everyday athletes are not doing enough mental work when trying to attempt, say, an endurance event?
It's becoming more and more prevalent, right? Again, like the stigma of mental illness is changing for the better. And I think people have greater literacy over the terms that are related to mental health, like stress, purpose, burnout, all of this kind of stuff. And I think when people who are so successful in sport are so vocal about the mental side being a big part of their success, then everyone will look at them and be inspired by them. So it does come from the top. So I think of LeBron James, for example, his collaboration with Calm, and his meditation, mindfulness, even his longevity is down to the way he psychologically views the game, how he's in love with the process. You think of Victor Wembanyama in the NBA as well, who spent the off-season with the monks in East Asia, and first time anyone's ever done that.
Right.
And he comes into this year and demonstrates a mental fortitude. Now, if he wins the championship, for example, everyone is going to go from maybe laughing at him a little bit to wanting to copy him. So I think it is top down, and people will look at those who are succeeding, and if they're doing it, then it gives them permission to do it. But particularly endurance training, as you said. You think of Eliud Kipchoge as well, one of the greats. I remember his mantra, right?
To say no.
I mean, the one that I remember from, I think it was a documentary, because as very well in running, we're encouraged to have a mantra that we go to when we need to.
Where do you go when you're in the pits?
Yeah, exactly. And his is press on, press on, press on, press on, and that's what he says in his head when he needs that. And I think that's wonderful. That's a mentality thing. And when he's so vocal about having that mantra and having it be such a sort of humble and determined one, everyone listens because he's a great.
It's interesting though, because I'm trying to think relatively to the everyday person. So a lot of people see these greats, but they don't, they believe that only the greats need it. And I think it's important for people to understand that everyone has a mindset and everyone needs to work on their mind,
Absolutely.
And yes, we can take from the professional sportsmen or the entrepreneurs, the big CEOs, we can take positivity and learn from them, but it's about adapting it into a real life scenario. So your 9 to 5 worker, your person that's just making mincemeat, got a roof over the table, got a family to look after. How do we implement that discipline into that person's life?
I think a big part of that is learning, again, the psychoeducation, developing the self-awareness. What is discipline? If say, for example, we learn about it and it's impulse control, okay, then it gives you something a bit more concrete. What are your impulses that you need to control? What are those temptations?
I can't stop eating chocolate. So I can't stop thinking about your story you just told me about chocolate fish because I have no control. Those M&S cookies, have you ever had them?
They are fantastic.
They are
the chocolate chip ones.
Yeah. In the big packet. They literally cripple me. So I don't have the discipline there. But I feel like my brain works where I have the discipline elsewhere. So I train every day. So it's fine. But that could not be the case. It can be counterintuitive.
I mean, there is balance. And a good friend of mine once told me a little of what you love, a little of what you fancy does you good.
Right.
Sometimes. So you can have these guilty pleasures. It's part of being human. I'm not saying so go ahead and do that forever, but I don't think we should be, have a negative view of ourselves if we do that sometimes. It's interesting as well how you say you can have discipline for certain areas of your life and then not others. The fact that you do exercise so much probably means that you have a little bit to indulge in a little bit with the
but I still
chocolate
struggle
cookies.
with it.
Yeah.
Like I struggle with it mentally. Like every time I do it, I hate myself.
And the question for me that comes is, so why do we change in certain aspects and not in others? And this is a question I've been thinking about a lot recently. And one of the conclusions I've come to is it comes down to what are the stakes, right? What is there to gain or lose?
Yeah.
And something that is a little bit uncomfortable in terms of answering that question that I've sort of encountered is that a lot of the stakes can sometimes be fear driven, which is very effective. Like, say, for example, someone doesn't have a lot of impulse control with their diet generally and is getting married, or it's summer coming up and they know their beach bod is going to be on show. There can be an element of fear where they're like, if I don't do this, I'm going to hate myself in those moments. I'm not going to look good. I'm not going to feel good. I'm going to feel embarrassed. And that fear is kind of like what's at stake.
Yeah.
It can be healthy, but then if you're purely driven by fear all the time, it's not a very pleasant way to live. It's about finding that right balance.
And that can drive anxiety, I think. Because I'll give you a good example, a personal example. When I went through that anxiety issue in the beginning stages and I took myself to the hospital because I thought I was going to collapse and it was high blood pressure from anxiety. That was the last day I smoked. So I took that scenario of fear that I was not healthy and I cut smoking immediately.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a smoke since.
Because you were very intimately confronted with what's at stake, right? There's many stories about it when people need healthcare, like you did. That is the moment where they change because they realize, actually, I could die from this.
Exactly.
And fear of death is a very valid fear. It's one of the most powerful ones. So when it comes to healthy habits, like stopping unhealthy habits, health is a big one, and having health scares often leads to change.
Yeah. How do we make people change before they get the health scare? That's the problem.
I mean, some people might unfortunately let it get there before they feel motivated enough or aware enough that they need to change. But I guess it then comes back to the psychoeducation, helping people have the self-awareness that, okay, I'm on this road. either I change now or I change when I have a catastrophe.
Yeah, yeah.
And which one do I really want to have?
Mm. Have you suffered from any mental is that a reason why you went into this practice?
Yeah, there's a very common kind of like idea in um, help seeking professions, and particularly in mental health, that everyone's there for a reason. Everyone is there for a personal reason. And I think that's somewhat healthy in a way, where you can lead yourself to um, choosing a career because you feel a deep sense of personal connection with it. For me personally, as I mentioned, when I began medical school and really became an adult, I had to confront a lot of the very um, clear ways that I was coping with stress. And um, say, for example, looking back, I think I was going into nights out with my friends and drinking quite heavily as a way of looking back, coping. In the moment, you don't think, oh,
Yeah.
I'm coping, like this is my way of coping. But looking back, it's like, okay, I clearly drank too much because I wasn't coping very well. And so I think that caused a shift in how, like, the behavioral aspects, what I can be doing behaviorally, the habits, the actions to protect my mind and make it healthy, as well as my own personal struggles. Those in my family very close to me have been very affected by conditions of the mind. Very close loved ones who've been to rehab for addiction
Mm-hmm.
and lived their whole life with anxiety disorders. Others have had years of their life taken away from them from long depressive episodes. And when you see that kind of thing, especially as someone who was in my early years of medical school deciding what path I wanted to take, those definitely led me to choosing mental health as well,
Mm-hmm.
because seeing how they didn't really have a clear idea of what could help them, how they got there, they didn't really have the answers. So all of these things give me a great sense of purpose
Mm-hmm.
in my work. And I think that overlap between personal and professional is something that I feel very
Yeah.
grateful to have
Yeah.
in my work.
It's amazing because a lot of us don't have that purpose in that everyday work.
Mm.
And you mentioned something there, you spoke about stress, and I've read one of your articles and how is this good or bad and
Mm.
what's good stress versus bad stress. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we can we will all experience stress
Yeah.
and challenging moments, problems. They are not a bug of life, they're a feature of life.
Yeah.
They will happen. So it's not about stress is bad or avoiding it. It's about seeing those problems and challenging circumstances as something to rise to,
Mm.
and seeing the opportunity in how it can shape you for the better, how it can be building skills and um, helping you grow.
Yeah. I think it's good to be put out there and in difficult situations because once you overcome a situation, you can now take on a bigger situation.
Mm,
And the mind adapts. And that's what I'm finding with endurance sports and even this podcast. I always say that in the beginning, I couldn't podcast without my friends. It was not possible because I was too scared.
mm,
Then all of a sudden, I did one-on-ones. Did one, it was fine. Could roll. Then I did one by myself. I was too scared to do that. Did one, fine. It's unbelievable how the mind adapts. Do a half marathon, do a marathon, do an ultra. And all of a sudden, once you've done something, you've adapted to be able to do that thing.
mm,
So even in stressful situations, in a difficult situation, if you get put in it and you overcome it, yes, it might have put strain on the body and the mind, but the next time the strain will be a little bit less.
hmm
Would you?
Fantastic. Yeah, I totally agree. I think is really interesting in what you said there is how you gave yourself a stepwise progression as well. Those kind of baby steps
Yeah,
at each stage there. If you'd gone straight to the end,
yeah,
straight to solo podcasting, straight to the ultra, it would have been too much. And I'm not sure if you're aware, you may well be, about the sort of this model for um, finding your growth zone. There's the comfort zone,
Right.
the growth zone, and then beyond that it can be actually quite harmful zone,
Interesting.
right? So you need the right balance between challenge and your abilities, challenging enough to put you out of your comfort zone, but not so challenging that it completely overwhelms you and breaks
Yeah.
you down.
Yeah. And a good point to that is if you look at running,
Mm.
when people sign up for a marathon and it's so hard and it's a chore and it's a bane to their existence, they never come back because it was too hard on their body.
Mm.
It was too hard on their mind. They didn't enjoy the training and they don't come back because they overextended and then failed,
Yeah.
which is so interesting.
Yeah.
How do you sort of mitigate your stress or anxiety in your life on a day to day?
Yeah. I mean, work can be very stressful with how
How many hours are you putting out?
so the hours they may not even be as much as in finance.
Right.
It's the shift work, which the irregularity of it can be stressful, and the different types of work, the intensity of it, how many different patients you might need to see in a day, how quickly you need to get the work done so that you can move on to the next one.
Is it high pressure?
Yeah, and the pace of it, right? So when I get home from work, having kind of been in a state
Yeah.
for 8 hours, if it is, where you're basically in a high stress mode and your blood pressure might be high, your cortisol's through the roof, I have to intentionally cope well, otherwise it will have long-term effects, or I could slip into coping in unhealthy ways. And for me, the best is always going for a run.
Really?
Always.
Okay.
I love going to the gym as well,
Right.
and you definitely feel great after that, fresh and enlivened. But running for me has always been something that probably one of the clearest things in my life where I know I will always feel better afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And that's coming from a doctor.
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I was saying this to you earlier that everyone has their own different body types.
Yeah.
And mine in particular, I would probably like it to be a little bit more skewed to bodybuilding than it is,
Interesting.
but it's more of an ectomorph body type. And so I'm more suited to long distance running. I just have been from school. I've always loved playing football because of that.
Right. So what does your running look like? After work,
Yeah.
your weekly running?
Yeah. So a few times a week, I try and alternate between running and the gym just to try and build in all the ways that I want to. The runs though are usually 5 to 10K.
Yep.
I find that a very good sweet spot where I can really push myself. But beyond that, if I'm pushing myself at the extent that I am, I'll probably cause too many injuries. It's just not sustainable for longer than 10K for me. But sometimes I do long runs where, very well from the difference between going for like a faster run versus a longer run. At the beginning of the longer runs, it feels like a very comfortable pace. And then towards the end of it, you feel like, okay, it was the same pace as before, which was really comfortable. And it's just because it's been for a long time now that this is where the endurance part comes in.
Yeah.
But because it's quite intense at work sometimes, I like jumping into that intensity quite quickly with a 5 to 10K quick run.
Interesting. Yeah, you try and sweat it out and
Yeah.
you try and get your mind off. So you got to turn the body on and that generally takes a little bit more effort. But I know I'm going to love your answer to this. So would your purpose for running be for that mental clarity and that break from work, not necessarily performance in running?
My purpose for running, I think it's something I enjoy. It's a way for me to exercise my body in a way that's good for it. It feels healthy. Mentally, it's very important as well. I feel like it's even more of a mental challenge than it is a physical one.
Yeah.
Because you get to a pace and then what enables you to keep going at that pace is a mental thing for me. So I like pushing myself because it makes me, as you said, sweat out the stress in a way. And also I feel like I'm growing mentally and physically. It's good for my heart and lungs as well as my muscles, which is something that I know weightlifting is good for the heart and lungs in ways that people maybe don't expect. But I have asthma as well.
Okay.
So running means I don't ever need an inhaler. which is good. I feel like if I didn't
That's
run, I'd
amazing.
probably
Yeah.
need an inhaler.
Yeah.
And maybe if I had a chest infection, I might need an inhaler, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a crystal clear, like, my purpose for running is one specific thing. It's all of those things, and that's why it
Yeah.
is so
Powerful.
important to me and powerful, because
Mm.
it ticks so many of those boxes.
Do you recover? What's your recovery look like?
Stretching
Stretching. Yeah.
and sometimes so I was finished quite hard. It's one of my favorite parts of the run, and it's probably where I feel my mental robustness being cultivated the most.
Yeah.
And then when I finish kind of at my doorstep in a way, I'm out there stretching a bit outside, dynamically cooling down, and then
Right.
when I'm inside.
Well, we're going to
scattered in.
add something to your recovery. So I'm sending you home with some of this Wintergeen products, and I want you
Amazing.
to try it because it's unbelievable. It's magnesium. Their magnesium range is what I use for my running. And so you rub it onto your legs so it goes directly to the muscle.
Mm.
So bath in the Epsom salts, put the magnesium cream on, and as you'll very well know, you'll sleep like a baby.
Mm.
Honestly, it hits you like a truck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we're going to send you home with a packet of that so that your recovery can be even better.
I'll let you know how it goes.
I want you to, because
Yeah.
seriously, like, plug, but I use this stuff
Mm.
and I literally have fallen in love with it. I use the anti-cramp spray during my ultra.
Okay.
And because it hits the legs like immediately, honestly, I think it was one of the reasons why I got through. Because I did the London Marathon and then the ultra immediately afterwards.
Wow.
So my legs were like shot
Mm.
and I needed like all the help I could get. But that mental clarity is going to be for a different episode where we have to dive into that endurance. But I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. It was really, really interesting to talk. And I think we might have to run it back because I think there's so many things that we can touch on.
For sure. I mean, to be honest, we could speak endlessly even today. So it does feel like it's a conversation ended too soon, but it's even more reason to pick it up another time.
Because like you say, the mind is endless. And I think the journey that you're on in discovering the mind, I want to stay attached to that journey. Because if I'm going to have this platform to educate people, even if it's biased towards, sports, the mind is the most important player in everything we do in life.
Mm-hmm.
So, kudos to you. And, I look up to you as someone that's wanting to challenge the world and make it a better place through the work that you do. And like you say, go against the giants that are moving in the other direction, which I think is another conversation altogether. I didn't want to touch on it earlier because I feel like that's a discussion in itself. So yeah, thank you for what you do. And I'm looking forward to watching your journey and continuing to read your stuff. And hopefully we'll chat again soon.
For sure. I really appreciate it. And, from me as well, I look up to you. And I think we should all look up to each other in the ways that we can learn from each other. Your episodes and your open, vulnerable conversations are so needed, and helping people realize that we don't need to negotiate with ourselves. We can fight for what we want, seeking discomfort to grow in the ways that we want to. I get that feeling every time I listen to one of your episodes, and I look forward to continuing to do that as well.
Well, thank you. I really, really appreciate that.
Cool.
Thank you, my man. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
All good.